I said in the Dune doc that the next video will be about GDI. That video is still on the way, but before I get to it, I wanted to cover something important first, which will require narration from a real-world perspective as opposed to the usual pseudo-in-universe style. So let's replace the EVA logo to represent that. Question: how exactly does Red Alert tie in to the Tiberium universe? Oh, if you never played Red Alert in the last 23 years and have been holding out for the remasters, spoilers right from the get-go. But come on, 2 weeks rule. There are 3 universes in Command & Conquer: Tiberium, Red Alert, and Generals. They're all self-contained, but the first Red Alert game displayed unambiguous ties to the first C&C. It was a prequel, though the fact that it was related to the story was a surprise twist, not the main purpose of the narrative. I don't have a source on this other than second-hand hearsay, but I'm led to believe that Red Alert was originally supposed to have 2 canonical campaigns, in the same vein as Firestorm and Tib Wars. While that idea didn't make the final game, both campaigns still led to the same outcome. Either way, Stalin is deposed and the Soviet Empire is dismantled, and the story continues on to Tiberium Dawn. In the Allied campaign, the Allies win, simple as. In the Soviet campaign, Kane himself turns out to be Stalin's personal advisor, and when Stalin claims victory, he is killed, with a revelation that the Brotherhood has infiltrated the Union and has orchestrated the entire thing. Now, the intent behind the war wasn't to destroy, but to conquer.
Russia's borders will stretch from coast to coast, for a united Russia is our destiny.
Europe will have taken a beating in the event of either victory, but it would be irreparable, especially if the Soviet Union were to collapse soon after. So, both campaigns by design can lead to Tib Dawn, with Soviet victory having only been brief. Counter-Strike and the Aftermath have extra missions set during the war, but best I can tell, the Giant Ants mini-campaign It Came From Red Alert was set following Allied victory. Here, the Allies are coloured gold and have access to some Soviet tech like the Mammoth tank. This looks a bit familiar, doesn't it? Maybe the Giant Ants are canon, and maybe they're not. I don't put a huge amount of stock into it, same with Funpark. But it is implying a link between the Allies and GDI, which I'll go more into next time. Now, if events in one campaign's timeline do not contradict the other campaign's timeline, then I think it's reasonable to assume that said events probably happened in both. Whether this mini-campaign happened or not, I think it's reasonable to conclude that following Soviet victory and subsequent dissolution, the Allied nations, or whatever's left of them, most likely appropriated Soviet tech. Then we get to Tib's Son, starting the trend of each sequel following on from the previous game's good guys ending. Same goes for Red Alert 2, which unambiguously follows on from the Allied victory in Red Alert 1. This, to me, is a soft retcon. Previously, we had 2 campaigns which both had different events, but which led to the same conclusion. One of these campaigns is now redirected to lead into Red Alert 2, leaving just the Soviet campaign leading to Tib Dawn. Does this cause any problems with the story? Well, the Allied campaign only includes very oblique references. Well, a reference.
Increasing global Allied support. This proposal calls for the formation of a global defense agency to be temporarily established in an as-yet unnamed European capital.
This could easily be written off in a Red Alert timeline as, well, the agency was never formed, or it was dissolved without nods to fight, or we never see it, or any number of handwaves. The Giant Ants mini-campaign is dubiously canon, as we've said, and crucially, Kane never appears in the Allied campaign. In the Red Alert universe, there is no Kane, there is no Nod nor Tiberium on Earth. For more on this, check out the Red Alert chronology doc, there's a load more detail on this topic there, and I'll be referencing some concepts it explains. Nadia gets a mention in the Allied campaign, but she could just be a regular Soviet here and not a Nod agent. No Kane, no Nod. There is this man though, who I have a feeling may have been played by Joe Kukan going by the suit, but it's far too blurry to be conclusive, and even if Joe played this character, doesn't necessarily mean it's Kane. Also, since when does Kane wear a hat? Remember, the Allied campaign is canon to Red Alert 2, and there is no Kane in that universe. The Soviet campaign, on the other hand, unquestionably features Kane and Nod.
This temporary chaos in Europe will only help to fuel the Brotherhood's cause.
The way I see it, if Kane exists, his meddling gives the Soviets the upper hand and they win. If Kane doesn't exist, the Allies win. For more on Schrödinger's Kane, again, here you go. When the first Decade collection was released, it included references to the 3 separate universes, which fans naturally took as a retcon of the Tib universe events in Red Alert 1. This is especially notable since no game since Red Alert 1 has ever referenced events outside of its own universe, with the exception of things that can just be passed off as Easter eggs. That is, until CNC 3. Tib Wars had a bunch of extra lore material inside and out of the game, including Kane's criminal dossier. Quote, "It is interesting to note that classified CIA intel files reveal the presence of a man closely resembling Kane, blank. Obviously, this would make Kane's present-day age near 125, and therefore the connection is impossible. Unless, of course, there were any truth to the notion of the man being immortal. We do know that Kane is at the very least extremely long-lived, so despite the author's doubts, this is entirely possible. Joe Kukan was born in 1965, which would have made him around 32 during the filming of Red Alert 1. This in-universe dossier was written in 2030. 125 minus 32 is 93. Take that off 2030, and we have 1937, circa the year to which the dossier is referring. We don't know exactly when the alternate Second World War of Red Alert 1 took place. To my knowledge, the only dates ever mentioned in that game are in the original timeline when the original Einstein goes back in time, but this is not the Einstein that appears in the campaigns. The war does not necessarily start in 1946. My best guess is somewhere in the 40s or 50s, perhaps 1943 if the old Red Alert website is to be believed, though the dates in some of its pages are all over the place, suggesting the GPS in Red Alert is impossibly anachronous, and the site may have been based on the original concept of setting Red Alert 1 in 1970, even though Red Alert 2 is set in 1972 and Einstein and Stalin were dead by then. We could do a whole video on that topic. However, Stalin had been General Secretary of the Soviet Union since 1922. So that kind of adds up. This says to me that the dossier is referring to Kane acting as advisor to Stalin shortly before the war. Now, this is a rather tenuous link, but it's placed right at the end of the dossier and seems oddly specific, that I think it's trying to reference Red Alert without being ham-fisted and obvious. If so, then the Tiberium universe considers Red Alert 1 canon, and is specifically referring to events seen in the Soviet campaign that cannot have happened in the Allied campaign or wider Red Alert universe, namely Kane's meddling. Anyway, that's what I wanted to cover. The Allied campaign leads to the Red Alert universe, and the Soviet campaign leads to the Tiberium universe. You don't have to accept this if you don't want to. The ambiguity of some parts of the CNC lore is actually a strength, particularly surrounding Kane, but this is the approach I favour, and which I will be using in future lore videos. This video took far too long to make, sorry about the wait. The next lore video is still scheduled to be on GDI, but next time we'll be going in depth with the remasters. My name is Stefan, thank you so much for watching.